Hey guys, early warning if the title didn't give it away already, there are Avengers Endgame spoilers ahead. In Avengers Infinity War, Josh Brolin's Thanos finally achieved his goal in the Marvel Cinematic Universe after having been teased as far back as 2012 when he appeared in the mid-credits scene of the Avengers. He collected all 6 Infinity Stones, snapped his fingers, and wiped out half of all life in the universe before retiring to a remote planet to live out his remaining days in peace. But that peace was soon disturbed as the Avengers caught up with him in Endgame and killed him upon realizing he'd destroyed the stones. Moreover, he died again later in the movie when the 2014 version of the character showed up in 2023, which ended with Tony Stark using the Infinity Stones to snap him out of existence. But was that Thanos' goal all along? Did the Mad Titan want to die? This theory suggests so. So let's get into it. You may remember back in 2012, in that aforementioned Avengers mid-credits scene, that Thanos turned his big purple face to the camera and smiled, signaling his introduction as the big bad of the MCU going forward. Played by the little-known Damien Poitier at the time, the prune-chinned villain was reacting to the other's suggestion that challenging humanity would be to court death. While this could easily have been taken at face value, meaning that going up against the Avengers would risk being killed, it also immediately invoked images from Marvel's comic books. You see, in the comics, Thanos has quite literally courted the affection of Mistress Death, the personification of the very concept of death in the Marvel Universe. He has a very deep and extremely twisted love for the character, who's often presented as both an actual woman or a hooded, skeletal Grim Reaper type being. That love stems from an obsession with dying. Thanos' weakness in the comics is often presented as being the fact that he subconsciously wants to die, and getting close to the being who controls life and death will get him closer to it. And there's a theory that the MCU version of the character has had the same morbid urge since the moment he was first introduced. Of course, that theory starts with the mid-credits scene from the Avengers, in which the Mad Titan smiled at the idea of putting his life at risk. Why else would he do that unless he at least somewhat liked the idea of dying? Then you have to think about the fact that in spite of the fact that he got his hands on the Infinity Stones fairly easily in the end, which he must have known he was capable of doing, he was previously giving them away and letting others collect them on his behalf for several years. He sent Loki after the Space Stone, knowing the God of Mischief could have potentially used it against him given his disloyal nature. And he literally handed the would-be king of Jotunheim the Mind Stone in order to let him go after it. Essentially, Thanos' plan was to give an evil sorcerer the opportunity to have 2 Infinity Stones in his possession, knowing full well that having them both would actually make him powerful enough to kill him. It didn't end up happening, but did Thanos really think someone known as the God of Mischief wouldn't use 2 Infinity Stones against him?
Do you have a bit of experience in that arena?
Then came his attempts to gain the Power Stone, arguably the most dangerous of the Infinity Stones in 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy. Rather than just show up on Morag and get it himself, he sent the volatile Kree warlord Ronan after it. I mean, really? What kind of maniac would send Ronan the Accuser after an item powerful enough to destroy planets and expect him to just hand it over without any issues? It's like Thanos was literally hand-picking characters who might use the Infinity Stones to turn on him because he wanted to die. Then came the moment he finally decided to get off his cosmic chair and collect the Infinity Stones himself in that Avengers Age of Ultron mid-credits scene in 2015.
Fine. I'll do it myself.
It's as though he was suggesting he'd have to go on a suicide mission given that his pawns weren't up to the task of killing him. Following a teaser in the mid-credits scene of 2017's Thor Ragnarok, the next time we actually saw Thanos was in 2018's Avengers Infinity War. From the very start of the movie, it was emphasized that nobody in history had ever wielded more than 1 Infinity Stone. So Thanos clearly had no idea exactly what that would do to him, even with the gauntlet he'd had made harnessing their power. Yet without hesitation, he proceeds to add all of them to his person one by one. Again, this would certainly suggest he had absolutely no qualms about dying along the way. En route to collecting them all, you also get the distinct impression that he wasn't going all out, which was always going to be a risk against characters like Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and Thor. He could have easily killed guys like Spider-Man, Star-Lord, and Drax, but it was like his efforts were half-baked in the hope that someone would land a killing blow. Of course, it never happened, and ultimately he snapped his fingers, again having absolutely no idea or care about whether or not it would kill him. But alas, it didn't. It just severely wounded him. And that brings us to Avengers Endgame, where it seemed as though his mission to die was really turned up a notch. It's kind of understandable. He'd achieved his life goal of wiping out half of all life in the universe, He'd lost all of his key allies, including Gamora, who he loved, and he was seemingly permanently injured by the effects of the snap. Early in the movie, it was revealed that he'd use the stones again in order to destroy them. Not only would he have known that this second use of the stones when he was already severely injured could have killed him, but he also did so knowing that it would send out a huge wave of cosmic energy that would be detected by the heroes who'd be searching for him. And that's exactly what happened. And what do you know? When they arrived on the remote planet he'd retired to, he had absolutely no weapons, no technology, no warning systems, no henchmen or bodyguards, and no defenses in place. Heck, he was using his armor as a scarecrow. And if that doesn't scream, "I want to die," nothing ever will. His use of the term "I am inevitable" just prior to Thor cutting his head off with Stormbreaker would also suggest he had a cockiness about him, as if he knew death wouldn't actually be the end of him. And let's be honest, the idea of death would become a lot more easy to take if, say, you wanted to sit by the side of Mistress Death as her undead lover. And let's not forget that Thor went for the head in that aforementioned scene based on the advice that Thanos had personally given him in the previous movie.
You should have gone for the head.
Seriously, why would you ever give someone advice on how to kill you? Especially if you know that person and his powerful friends are going to be angry with you for the rest of their lives. The answer? Because Thanos wanted Thor to catch up with him and go for his head. Simple! Of course, Thanos returned in spite of his early demise in Endgame, courtesy of time travel, as the 2014 version of the character was able to emerge in 2023. This past version of the Mad Titan had literally seen himself decapitated by Thor, courtesy of Nebula's digital memory, yet he was still prepared to fight the God of Thunder again alongside both Captain America and Iron Man, in spite of the fact that he had no Infinity Stones in his possession at that point. In fact, he was well aware of the fact that the Avengers had all 6 of them in their possession, but was still prepared to do battle with them when he had none. Even against the likes of Captain Marvel and Scarlet Witch, that's a guy with a death wish if we've ever heard of one. He also looked remarkably unfazed when thousands of heroes emerged through portals to fight him. In fact, it felt as though he might even have been relieved by it, as if he knew death might be close. Of course, Thanos would get his hands on all 6 Infinity Stones again, and he also used those words again, "I am inevitable," before snapping his fingers to no effect and realizing Tony Stark had taken them from him. The fact that he's used those words on 2 occasions, both just before he died, seems very telling. It's like Marvel Studios are trying to tell us that in spite of what's about to happen to Thanos, his use of those words mean we'll see him again somehow. It was, of course, at that point that Stark would snap Thanos and his armies out of existence, and Thanos looked incredibly calm and accepting about the whole thing. In fact, he sat down and made himself comfortable, ready for the moment he would turn to dust. Again, it was like he was happy it was happening. Perhaps he knew he was heading to the other side to be with Mistress Death. All things considered, it's as though Thanos knew that a path towards collecting the Infinity Stones in the MCU was a path to his demise, and that's why he wanted them so badly. And from the first moment we saw him, that court death line was hinting towards that fact. It's worth noting that in the MCU, the Infinity Stones were created by 4 cosmic entities, those being Infinity, Eternity, Entropy, and, you guessed it, Death. They were shown in Guardians of the Galaxy on the wall of the temple vault where the Power Stone was kept on Morag, and again when the Collector gave his explanation about the stone's origins later in the same movie. What better way of getting Death's attention than by collecting the stones she helped to create and using them to kill trillions of living beings around the universe? It's worth noting that there's an Eternals movie set for release in Phase 4 of the MCU, and Thanos is one of the most prominent Eternal characters in the comics. Specifically, he's an Eternal deviant hybrid, and it would be very strange for a movie based on the Eternals not to include him. There is every chance Thanos could re-emerge in that movie at Death's side, having achieved his goal to die and exist as her undead lover. The very word eternal would suggest anybody who's part of that species will live forever, and it would mean Thanos saying "I am inevitable" on 2 occasions makes a lot of sense. The fact that Disney recently purchased Fox also makes the idea of Deadpool appearing in the MCU very plausible going forward. And Deadpool and Thanos have a long-standing rivalry for Death's affections in the comics that has them both wanting to die to be by her side. We might find that Thanos ends up getting resurrected in the franchise only to express his frustration at being forced to compete with the Merc with a Mouth for the love of the dark cosmic entity once more. And that would be an awesome and morbidly hilarious thing to see in a live-action movie. Josh Brolin loves playing Thanos, and given how iconic the character has become in such a short period of time, he's this generation's Darth Vader. It would be strange to scrap him already. It would be amazing to see him return, as big and as bad as ever, as a sort of undead entity whose ultimate goal to sit at Death's side gets revealed on screen before our very eyes. If you thought Thanos was dangerous in the MCU up to now, just imagine what an undead, immortal version of the character would be like with one of the most powerful cosmic entities in existence, the character with power over the very concepts of life and death working alongside him. We could get a whole new saga with an even more powerful, nefarious, and murderous version of the Mad Titan as the big bad. And think of how genocidal he'd have to become to up the ante in order to continue to impress Mistress Death. It's hard to imagine that any genuine MCU fans would have any complaints about such a fantastic character returning, that's for sure. So what do you think of this theory? Did Thanos really want to die in Avengers Endgame? Would you like to see him return as the undead, immortal lover of Mistress Death in the MCU? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. And please remember to like the video and subscribe to Screen Rant so you never miss our great new uploads in the future. See you next time, guys.